Hey y'all. Hope everyone is doing incredible out there. Just like the last couple of years, I'll sign up with a few other podcasts to do a themed collaboration, and this is another one of those. You'll get something brand new from Music City 911, along with some true crime from other shows too. The theme for this one, being that it's Valentine's, it's called Broken Hearts. It was put together by our friends over at Buried Motives. Thank you, Christy and Melissa, for throwing all this together. Y'all have a good one.
Hey listeners, welcome to our Broken Hearts Collaboration 2.0.
Last year, we had so much fun getting together with our fellow podcasters, so we decided to keep a good thing going. And this Valentine's Day, we are going to explore the twisted narratives of love's darker side.
In the realm of relationships, the 4 seasons serve as a haunting metaphor for the complexities of love, especially when it goes wrong.
In this collaboration, we will be telling cases that represent each season of love. Spring is a time when love is fresh and full of promise, and couples often get swept up in the excitement of new relationships, experiencing infatuation and passion.
However, sometimes that young love isn't necessarily on the up and up. We are so excited to introduce Brandon Hall from Music City 911.
He is our favorite 911 dispatcher from Nashville. His cases often include audio from actual 911 calls.
Buckle in, listeners, because what Brandon has for you is chilling.
Teenage love is a powerful but sometimes dangerous thing. It can be a turbulent experience, intense emotions, newfound independence, and navigating complex social dynamics. All are things that often are learning experiences for a pair of teens in the throes of love. But things can intrude on that teenage love. Emotions like jealousy, insecurities, or sometimes a third party can derail a young relationship. Love and crime, 2 seemingly different forces, often intersect in surprising and unsettling ways. They're not generally associated with one another, but during the passion of love, a crime may take place, or sometimes even intervene in that love, or the love one thought they had. The first thing you may think of is some form of domestic violence between the 2 parties. That is absolutely the most common form of love and crime. A lot of times these crimes go unreported. No one knows except those involved. People may notice signs and never say anything. Other times, it's blatantly obvious, and there are other instances where there are other issues at play. Passions in love and crime come to a boiling point, and the pot holding those passions get knocked over and spilled, creating something that can never be repaired. Welcome to Music City 911.
911.
Oh my! Oh God!
911. Ma'am? Ma'am?
An emergency up here on Forest Circle.
On Forest Circle?
Yes,
What happened?
Oh, looks like a dead man in the car. Right up on the hill on Forest Circle.
All right, just a second. What happened? Do you know what happened?
Hurry! I don't know. I just drove by it. It's something. Man, hurry! Hurry!
All right. Hold on just a second. What's your name?
A 911 call comes into the dispatch center in Corbin, Kentucky on August 20th, 2012. That call is something that is very infrequent there. A dead person, and from the sound of it, a possible murder. The call itself, you can hear the distress in the caller's voice, and distant in the background, another woman screaming. Corbin, Kentucky is a very small town located in southeastern Kentucky, about halfway from Lexington and Knoxville, Tennessee. There are just under 8,000 residents. Murder isn't something that happens there frequently. In 2022, there were 0 murders reported. So just 10 years prior, hearing something like this coming in on the 911 line, it was not something that would be considered a common occurrence. In a larger city like mine, Nashville, we'll get shootings and stabbings nearly every day, sometimes multiple times in one day. It's usual. So something like a death that has a possible crime related to it in a small town like Corbin, that in some years has literally 0 murders, dispatchers there would likely perk up in their seats as soon as they hear the info. The call, or at least the part that was released, had very little info in it. We know the location and that there is likely a dead man in a car, but that's about it. Shortly after that call came in, another call with a lot more info was placed.
County 911.
Yeah, you can put 1134 circle.
What's going on?
I just shot a guy.
You just shot a guy. What did you shoot him for?
He sure will second kill me. I'm sitting up here waiting on you.
In the city?
Yeah, 1134 circle.
Hold on just a second. Don't hang up.
Okay. What is it? Yeah.
What is your name?
Bill Cox.
What's your phone number, Bill?
521-1933, cell phone.
521-1933?
Yeah, 4 circle.
Are you in Corbin or are you in Williamsburg?
Corbin. I'm probably old drive in from top of the hill where it goes around the circle. You got the apartments up there.
Is he, where's he at? Is he okay? I mean,
no, he's shot. He's dead. I killed him.
Okay, hold on just a second.
Okay, he's sitting in the middle of the road with a car.
Okay, let me transfer you to the Stay on the line.
Okay.
Corbin Dispatch.
Hey. Yeah. Hello, who is this?
That's James.
James, what's it? Corbin Police Department?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just shot a guy in here a while ago. 1134 circle. He threatened to kill me and I shot him.
11044 circle?
1134 circle. You know, I'll drive in.
Uh-huh.
Come back here. I just put a little drive in from top of those hills up in there.
Okay. What's your name?
Bill Cox. He been hitting my daughter. He got a kid by a daughter. He been hitting her, beating her up. And I just got tired of it. The next night, I blow away on drugs and said he was killing me and all that stuff.
Uh-huh.
Ain't no way. He come up in the house while ago and he was moving everything out.
What's his name?
Ryan Abner.
Can you still see him?
No, he's dead. I shot him good. I'll make sure he's dead.
He is dead.
Yeah. I'm going to go to prison over it, but he's trying to beating on my daughter and stuff.
Hey, where's your gun at?
It wasn't my gun. I straight barred off a guy. I was thinking about buying off of him.
Well, where'd you put the gun?
I couldn't get back to the guy.
You done give it back to the guy?
Yeah.
Okay, so where are you at? Are you there to let him?
Up here? Yeah, I'm up here right now.
And the guy's there with you, and he's dead.
Do what?
The guy's there with you, the one he shot?
Do what?
The guy that you shot, is he there at 11:03?
Yeah, he's in the seat. Let's sit in the seat.
Units break for emergency traffic. 1103 4 circle, 1103 4 circle, shots fired, one subject possible 10-7. I'll advise that he shot the subject. Caller doesn't have the gun at this time. Advise he gave the gun back to an individual who borrowed it from.
They on the way? Yeah, I think they're on the way.
Yeah, they are on their way.
Okay. Let me get off here and call my brother and tell him where I'm at.
Okay, well, I need you to stay on the phone with me so that way when they get there, we can still talk just a little bit, okay?
Call me, Garage, 523. I work at Being Wheel Line. We don't Being Wheel Line.
Have him say
523-0012.
What's the phone number you're calling from there?
Yeah, I believe. 521-1933.
$1103.
0012. Yeah.
It's good.
I'll keep trying there.
Oh, yeah.
So they're going to take me to jail. Oh, well. I can Bob Hams try to get me out.
I'll keep calling till I get over there.
Yeah, get Bob Hams to get me out. If you can.
Yeah, they're coming. They're coming. They're over there on the way.
Whose gun was it that you used?
Joe Dobson. Joe Dobson.
Where does he live at?
Just about 2 houses above where I live at there.
Bought it.
I bought it, yeah.
How long ago did you shoot this guy?
Just a while ago, about 5 minutes ago.
And then you took the gun back up there to your neighbor and then come back?
Yeah.
What's the address? 4th Circle.
1103 4th Circle.
What's the circumstance? What's that number again?
523-0012.
I was advising this male subject was talking to his daughter. He had the pistol in his possession, was thinking about buying it. He used the pistol to shoot the subject. He's talking to several people in the background. They're all advising the subject to shoot together. He took the gun back up to his neighbor's house and left it there. Went back to the residence.
Shooter in.
It's going to be Bill Cox. Bill Cox, 10799 Avenue.
Hey, you think it's up there in
How many times did you shoot him?
30, I believe.
A friend of mine, I lost it to him the other day.
Where did you shoot him at?
I think in the head. You get beat up. He never got me alive. He never got me. I'm glad you see you, that guy. You won't worry about nobody else. Hello.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
He on the way?
I don't know, supposed to be. I don't know where they got out there.
They're on their way. They're coming just as fast as they can.
As a dog got through beating me up because she should have killed him. But she don't know she beat him up or she beat her up 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
She come back last night and she heard him holding her up, got hurt.
Yeah.
And she goes, I didn't hurt her, hit her leg. I didn't hit her leg. I didn't hit her. And that third show right there, you hit her.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, I'm going to go to prison over this worth it. That guy.
You won't go long. You stick with what he put in your life, and you brought this.
Well, he served my life 3 or 4 times, sir. Then that's all I go, too. So I tell you what, we'll try to get go through later.
Yeah.
Kids.
He jumped there and called him back down there.
I know it. Well, his mommy, daddy, his dad's a drug dealer.
Yeah.
They run him off.
Yeah.
His mom's a dope head. She's living in Ohio. She run him off. And she ain't gonna waste space till he comes down here for her.
Yeah, that's right. You're giving me nothing no reason.
Got Mickey again?
Second left in the 4th circle. It's going to be on your left out there before you get.
Mickey can find out what you can go back with him and try to get me out. Don't say it up against.
So it's the entrance closest to 7th Street. What's your phone number?
523 523 0012 0012. Yeah. Should be out there in a few minutes.
Well, nice of it.
Campbell. Okay, listen to me. I've got an officer just pulled up out front. Here's what I want you to do.
Okay.
I want you to make sure your hands are where he can see them real good.
Yeah.
And you listen to everything they tell you to do, okay?
Okay, I'm sitting up here in the white truck up here.
Bill
In a white truck?
down here right in his house. That's where he's going with his daughter.
I just shot him.
He shot him.
Okay, I'll walk out here.
You better get up.
Okay, listen, when you walk out real slow. Keep your hands up where he can see them, okay?
Okay.
Are you walking outside? And if I'm instructing the caller to step outside and keep his hands...
Say, well, yeah, here's the right here. Do you see the officer? Yeah, he's going to hang up. Yeah, go ahead and hang up. I see you. Yeah.
Not only do the dispatchers there get details about the incident, they get a full confession. The details in the call: the suspect, 56-year-old William Cox, which everyone knows as Bill, calls and says he just shot a man because the man said he was going to kill him. That man was 22-year-old Ryan Abner. Bill offers another reason in the call as to why he shot Ryan. Ryan had been beating Bill's daughter. During the call, Bill said he was likely going to prison for what happened, but it was worth it. Police arrived at the scene and, after some standard investigation, took Bill into custody and transported him to the Whitley County Detention Center, where he was held awaiting trial. Further details began to emerge after Bill and others were questioned about this. There had been an ongoing back and forth between Bill and Ryan. It dated back, at minimum, months. There was an ongoing feud of sorts, with Ryan dead in the middle of it. Ryan had been accused of physically assaulting Bill's daughter, Brittany, and had been doing so on many occasions. Ryan had also apparently been abusing drugs, which likely contributed to the abuse of Brittany. Bill took note of that, and several times Bill and Ryan got into it. All the arguments, or more, came to a head on that day in August 2012, when Bill borrowed a gun from someone else and used it to kill Ryan, shooting him 3 times, with 2 of those shots landing in Ryan's head. There were other components of this incident as well. Ryan and Brittany had a child together. During the shooting, Ryan, Brittany, and their child were all in the same car together. The woman that could be heard screaming loudly in the first call and began screaming loudly on the phone midway through the second call was Brittany. She could be heard saying, "You killed my husband," but Ryan and Brittany were not married. It wasn't even confirmed that they were engaged. Another aspect of this relationship that hasn't been mentioned yet: at the beginning of all this, I was talking about teenage love. Brittany was a teen. At 21 years old, Ryan and Brittany already had a child together. But Brittany was only 15 at that time. They had started dating, and I hesitantly say dating because of the age difference, when Brittany was only 13 years old. In Kentucky, the legal age of consent for a sexual act is 16. When they started seeing each other, when Brittany was 13, Ryan was 19. There are other aspects to this as well. Different penalties for variations of statutory rape depends on the age difference in the two participating. And statutory rape is considered a strict liability crime, meaning that force or violence doesn't have to be used. The only thing that is considered by a prosecutor is the age of the victim and the age of the suspect. Brittany would have been 14 or 15 years old when her and Ryan's child was born. That means that Ryan was either 20 or 21 years old when the child was conceived, well within the realm of statutory rape. It's not known why Ryan had never been charged with this crime. William Bill Cox went to trial in 2014. At the trial, numerous neighbors were called as witnesses. They all had the same story. They had witnessed physical abuse of Brittany by Ryan. Brittany, who was also a witness, denied anything bad had happened between them. The neighbors were also well aware of the arguments and such that had been happening with Bill and Ryan, stating that those had been going on for several months. The trial was wrapping up, and the Whitley County Circuit Court jury took 3 hours of deliberation to find Bill Cox guilty, but not of murder. He was convicted of first-degree manslaughter under extreme emotional distress, as well as 2 counts of first-degree wanton endangerment for shooting into the car while his daughter and grandchild was inside of it, endangering both of their lives. The 7-man and 5-woman jury could have recommended up to 30 years in prison for Bill's crimes, but ended up recommending 12 years. The judge, who under Kentucky state law could have reduced the recommended sentence but not increased it, agreed with the jury's recommendation. Bill was formally sentenced to 12 years in prison. As of recording this, he was not listed as still being a prisoner in the state of Kentucky. Before all this happened, Bill owned an auto repair shop. That's all for this incident. If you'd like to hear more, visit musiccity911.com or do a search for Music City 911 on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. For Music City 911, I'm Brandon, and y'all have a good one.
Thank you, Brandon, for bringing us that case. We are so grateful that we were able to collaborate with you again this year.
Brandon wasn't kidding when he said it was about young love.
Illegal young love.
You never want to side with a dirtbag, but I can definitely understand the motives.
Absolutely. But in the next season, the motives take on a more sinister tone.
Summer represents the time of heightened passion and intimacy. While relationships may flourish, this season can also amplify existing issues.
Arguments can become more intense, fueled by the heat of emotions. In extreme cases, conflicts can escalate into physical altercations, and the desire for revenge can lead to fatal outcomes,
especially in relationships marked by toxic dynamics.
And this next case is definitely filled with toxic dynamics. Please welcome Bill and Sandra from Crimes, Killers, Cults, and Beer to bring us another harrowing case.
Hey, everybody. My name is Bill, and this is my co-host, Sandra.
Hello.
And we are Crimes, Killers, Cults, and Beer, a true crime comedy podcast. And we were on this collab with Buried Motives and several other podcasts last year for Valentine's Day, but I had a different co-host then. but Sandra is here to stay.
This year, we're going to do an abridged version of an episode that we've already done on Crimes, Killers, Cults, and Beer. It's episode 136. And last year, we did a Florida story. And this year, we've got another Florida story for you that they both just happen to fit in with the theme of the collab. And if you're new to our podcast, we are from Florida. So there you go. This year, the story that we're doing comes from Daytona Beach.
Oh, God. Deidre Hunt, and I'll let you say the man's full name, Sandra. Costa
Fafopoulos.
Costantino, but yeah.
Fafopoulos.
Yeah.
Fafopoulos, yeah.
So if you want to hear the whole episode, it's episode 136 on Crimes, Killers, Cults, and Beer. So we're going to get it started, and I'm going to tell part of it, and Sandra's going to tell part of it. So here we go. This is the story of a love triangle turned greedy and deadly. Deidre Hunt was born February 9th, 1969 in New Hampshire. She and her boss, what was the name?
Constantino. Well, it's two different ways in some of the notes. You have Fotopoulos and you have Fofopoulos. So I'm not sure if it's a T or an F. So we'll just say Fotopoulos.
We'll just call him Costa.
Costa.
But she and her boss and former lover, Costas, murdered two boys and tried to murder Costa's wife as well in a murder for hire / insurance scam.
So Lisa and Costa, Fotopoulos, they were well known in the area, and on the outside, they were just friendly people who were community minded. They were wealthy, and they owned pretty much everything on Daytona Beach's boardwalk. And Costa had immigrated to the U.S. for college to basically chase the American dream. He wanted to become a self-made man, which we love here in the United States. And Lisa was born in the U.S. To another well-known Greek family, and I'm going to butcher this name, I'm sure, the Paspalakis family. And her father had immigrated to the U.S., got into real estate, and he basically did very well for himself.
Old school Greeks believe in arranged marriages to strengthen the family. And she was married to Costa, and they quickly became a popular power couple. Costa was friendly and loved being the life of the party. He was obsessed with being seen and recognized. Lisa's father died in 1988, and Costa and Lisa moved in with her mother to take care of her, which was an old Greek tradition. Costa and Lisa also acquired all of her dad's businesses, which made them the most power couple in Daytona Beach. Although successful, they weren't a happy couple. Like I said, it was an arranged marriage put strictly together to bolster the family. But deep down, Costa wanted it all for himself and only for himself, and greed was definitely a motivating factor for him.
So one day, he noticed a vacant bar on the boardwalk, and he wanted it. He went to another bar owner that he knew named Tony Calderoni and basically convinced him to invest, and they would be partners. And Tony agreed, and Top Shots Billiard Parlor opened. Top Shots became a top spot for transients and young people of the place, and the place also became known as Costa's Spot. He would flaunt his wealth, and he carried himself as a big shot businessman, and he was able to dazzle the young 20-somethings that frequented the place, and he just loved to flaunt his wealth. He liked to show off what he owned.
As one does.
He would also tell all the young people that went to the bar tall tales about how he was an assassin, he was a ninja, he worked for the CIA, you name it. And some people a lot of people bought it, but I'm sure some didn't, though.
But in 1989, 20-year-old Deidre Hunt came into Top Shots looking for a job. She was broke. She was drop-dead gorgeous. Costa's partner, Tony, was working that day, and he talked to her. He asked what she could do, and to which Deidre replied, "I can do anything you want." And he said, "Good. I need a server." So she was hired. And she was a good hire, too, because Top Shot's business drastically increased because of Deidre. And she was a hustler who knew how to use her looks and personality to get what she wanted, and she would come to work wearing a bikini. Tony put her up in a hotel down the street until she could get a place of her own.
So when Costa met Deidre, he was basically smitten.
Like when Michael Corleone got the thunderbolt when he saw Apollonia Vitelli in The Godfather?
Lisa caught on quickly, told Costa that if he cheated on her, he would be finished and he wouldn't get any of her father's businesses. And that didn't go over very well, as you can imagine, and their marriage got extremely nasty and volatile. November 4th, 1989, a man called 911 saying he heard gunshots in front of his house. Police were dispatched, and the dispatcher heard someone screaming in the background of the call. A woman was heard screaming that she had been shot, and an ambulance was also sent to the destination.
The caller was Dino
Apocalypse?
That's it.
I don't know.
Apocalypse.
Lisa's younger brother, who also lived in the house with them. According to Dino, it was Lisa who had been shot. And when the police got there, they could still hear a woman screaming. And it turned out that Costa had actually been the one that told Dino to call 911. Police found Costa with Lisa, who was bleeding from a head wound. And he said that the two of them had been asleep and they woke up when there was a gunshot in the room. There was an intruder standing over by Lisa. And Costa had grabbed his gun and shot the man 5 or 6 times. And there was, in fact, a young man face down on the floor, dead with gunshot wounds.
So police determined that it was an armed robbery gone wrong, and Costa reaped the rewards. The whole city was calling him a hero, and you know damn well he was eating up every bit of that attention. Lisa survived. The robber turned out to be 18-year-old Brian Chase. He was someone who helped out at Top Shots, and they paid him under the table. Police began the investigation thinking that Chase had fingered Costa specifically because he was rich. It wasn't a random robbery. A sliding glass door had been broken, and they figured that this was how Chase had gotten in.
You think Brian Chase had a brother in Sacramento, California named Richard? Probably not. November 7th, an anonymous call came into the police department. The caller was talking about the shootings of Lisa and of Brian Chase. He said that he had been offered money to kill Lisa. And who do you think offered the money to kill Lisa? It was Deidre Hunt. He said that she had been having an affair with the owner of Top Shots. The police brought Deidre in for questioning. She wanted to talk. She told them that if she did talk, Costa would hurt her. Deidre finally started talking, and she said that it started out that they were friends, but they were sleeping with each other, and it wouldn't be too long before Costa was saying that he loved her. And at that point, they had only known each other for about 3.5 months. Deidre knew that he was married to Lisa, but she didn't care.
They had come up with plans to kill Lisa so that they could get married. She also said that Lisa had a $100,000 and a $250,000 life insurance policy. With murder as a double indemnity option, the policies would double, making it a $700,000 payout. Deidre said that she recruited Brian Chase and offered him $5,000 to carry out the hit. She gave him the gun and told him to fake the robbery and to kill Lisa and to do it yesterday because that is what Costa wanted.
Deidre knew that Chase was never going to make it out alive, and the plan that she had with Costa was that Costa would just simply kill Brian in self-defense, which he, of course, did. You know, what's the first rule of an assassination? Kill the assassin.
She was telling
the story like me as a podcaster telling it. She had absolutely no skin in the game, or like she was describing a movie plot. Then, from out of nowhere, Deidre blurted out that she and Costa had killed a boy in the woods a couple weeks earlier. It was 19-year-old Kevin Ramsey who had used to work for Costa, and Costa was mad at him and wanted to kill him.
Costa told Kevin to come with him and Deidre to do some type of initiation, a hunter-killer club that he was part of. Basically, Robert Hansen. He backed this up with his paid assassin story, and he claimed to have killed 8 people professionally at that point. They were going to take him out into the woods, tie him to a tree, and shoot at his feet. And if he could take that and not freak out, then he was in the club. This would also lead to Kevin getting a career in the CIA. Sounds legit. Yeah. Kevin agreed to do this. Deidre, of course, was using her sensuality, and likely that helped convince him to do it.
Oh, boy. Once he was tied up, Costa handed Deidre a .22 with a silencer and walked away. He pulled out a video camera and told Deidre to shoot Kevin, and she did, 3 times in the chest, once in the head. Deidre even took police to the spot in the woods, and they found his body there still tied to the tree. Deidre was then arrested and charged with murder, and
when she was arrested, she was actually shocked that she was actually being arrested. Like, she helped them out. She cooperated, did all that stuff. But she took the police to the body, for crying out loud. Girl, you committed murder.
Costa was also arrested, and he agreed to talk. And he said that he loved his wife, and he would never, ever cheat on her. He denied being involved with Deidre at all and said that Lisa had no plans and no reason to even think about divorcing him.
So they had more than enough evidence to convict Costa, but by that time, Lisa was already aware that Costa had been having an affair. Someone had called her in October and told her. That someone was the wife of Tony Calderoni, Costa's partner. Lisa had decided to file for divorce, which meant that Costa would lose everything. This was when the plan for Moida was hatched, and why Costa wanted it done yesterday.
Lisa told police that she had seen Costa late one night roaming around the barbecue pit. And when the house was searched, they checked the pit, and in it was a bag that had an AK-47, which Deidre mentioned as well as a .22 pistol with a silencer. But one thing they hadn't found yet was a videotape that Costa had made of Deidre killing Kevin Ramsey. But when the garage was searched, the videotape was found.
The person filming was never shown, but it was later matched to Costa's voice. The video then cut to Kevin Ramsey tied to a tree. Deidre then took out the .22 and fired the first 3 shots. Kevin screamed in pain, and Deidre then grabbed Kevin's head with one hand and shot Kevin in the head.
Freaking cartel execution style. Seems like she's done this before.
In court, Deidre was charged with the murder of Chase, charged with the murder of Ramsey, and charged in the attempted murder of Lisa. She pled guilty to avoid the death penalty, but she was sentenced to death anyway.
Costa pled not guilty, and he swore he had nothing
To do with any of this. He was the innocent victim here.
It wasn't me.
But since he pled not guilty, that means he was going to trial. On October 8th, 1990, Costa's murder trial began, and Lisa testified against Costa. His testimony sealed Costa's fate. It illustrated a motive for the murder scheme.
It wasn't me.
The affair, and Lisa literally saying that Costa would lose everything. He wanted to get her out of the way so that he could take the $700,000 on the 2 double indemnity insurance policies and inherit her family's wealth.
Deidre even testified against Costa. She nailed him to the wall, making him out to be the mastermind of the whole scheme, and said he was very controlling in their relationship. She claimed that she had been brainwashed by him. It also came out that Costa inflicted ritualistic torture on Hunt by cutting her with razors, sucking her blood, throwing knives, burning her with cigarettes in an iron, poking her with needles, and threatening her with a gun. But during the trial, other things came to the surface. Kevin Ramsey had seen Costa using counterfeit money. He tried to blackmail Costa about it. Costa, having Deidre shoot him on camera, gave Costa dirt on Deidre to make him able to force her to do whatever he wanted her to do. And that also makes sense about him filming it.
It wasn't me.
Yeah, so let somebody who you tried to blackmail shoot at you. Makes sense.
Right.
But Costa took the stand in his own defense. He said that he was well within his rights to shoot Brian Chase, who tried to murder his wife, and he's right. If it hadn't been a staged murder. The voice on the videotape was also verified to be Costa by 6 different experts who also all testified.
It wasn't me.
On October 25th, 1990, the case concluded and the jury returned with the verdict. 2 counts of premeditated murder, guilty. Attempted first-degree murder of Lisa, guilty. Conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, guilty. He was sentenced to a date with old Sparky.
Good old Sparky. He's still available. Inmates can choose to be electrocuted if they want to be.
Again.
So he's sitting there waiting, patiently, waiting.
Dreaming that someday, sometime, old Sparky will be able to devour a convict one more time. And it'll happen, too. Eventually, somebody will request old Sparky. And when that happens, it'll make news.
And in 1995, Deidre appealed her death sentence and won the appeal. She got a retrial but was found guilty again and was sentenced to life without parole. Costa was initially scheduled to be put to death in 2008, but appeals got it pushed back. And as of 2023, he's still on death row, and no new date has been set. He's at Rayford Prison in Stark, Florida.
Yes.
And that's our abridged episode. Thanks, Sandra. That was fun. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks to Christy and Melissa of Buried Motives for putting this whole thing together again this year. We're happy to be part of it. Check us out, Crimes, Killers, Cults, and Beer. We're on every Spotify or on every streaming platform, and as well as on YouTube where we have videos. And if you want to hear the unabridged episode, it's episode 136. So thanks a lot for listening, and y'all have a happy Valentine's Day.
Have a great Valentine's Day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Wow, that case really was full of toxic dynamics.
So many different avenues to explore in that one.
For sure. If you want more information, go back and listen to their full episode.
But that brings us to autumn. And as relationships enter the autumn phase, couples often face challenges that reveal deeper issues.
This season can bring about feelings of betrayal or abandonment, especially if one partner seeks solace outside of the relationship.
The emotional turmoil can push individuals to desperate actions,
especially when they feel that they have no other option to get what they want.
And that is definitely the case with the tale that we'll be bringing you today.
Melissa already told this case on Buried Motives. It's titled Best Friends and Broken Hearts. She's going to give us a rundown of what happened during this case, but if you want all of the details, please go back and take a full listen.
Oh, you will definitely want all of the details, because it's not too often that a porcupine gets blamed for murder.
Yes, I was so stunned when I found out that a porcupine got blamed.
And people believed it for so long.
It's true.
When I first heard this case, the sequencing of the crime was so confounding. It had me reenacting the crime with my husband to try and understand the evidence. At the time, it was a first in our house. I may have done it a time or two since. I feel like lately I've been choosing a lot of cases where it wasn't an open and closed case. It took a while and some deep digging to find this dirtbag. But this one really should have been closed right away. The truth and murderer in this case eluded investigators for over 20 years, despite being the only possible suspect, because it wasn't the porcupine.
Poor little porcupine got blamed.
It's just so surprising that that's actually the story they ran with for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
On the morning of June 2nd, 1976, two friends, Marty Dillon and Stephen Schur, headed out to Marty's family's hunting camp. The two belonged to a club called the Wednesday Afternoon Club.
The Wednesday Afternoon Club. That sounds exciting.
Yeah. Can you guess when they met?
Wednesday afternoon.
You got it. It was a club that met on Wednesday afternoon and gave the men an excuse to shirk off their demanding careers for an afternoon to relax and enjoy some male bonding. Often this bonding involved drinking and shooting guns. This particular Wednesday, the club's attendance was looking a little sparse. It happened to be just Marty, 31, and Stephen, 36, that headed up to the Gunsmoke Retreat in Susquehanna County, just outside of Montrose, in Marty's BMW around 3 p.m. At some point during the second round of skeet shooting, Stephen decided he needed a smoke break. He loaded his 16-gauge Winchester pump-action shotgun so that it would be ready for him when he got back, and he placed his gun in a stand about 120 feet from the skeet shooting area. Marty, around this same time, unloaded his 20-gauge shotgun and leaned it against a tree. How the story would later be told was that no sooner had he done this, that Marty saw a porcupine, and he grabbed Stephen's gun and started running in pursuit of the animal. In his pursuit, he tripped over a loosened shoelace and fell on the gun, causing it to go off, shooting himself in the chest from close range, all because a porcupine had seemed like a good target. His injuries were catastrophic. There wasn't much that Stephen could do, even though he was a doctor. Stephen took off for help at a neighboring house and then quickly returned to the scene where he was overcome with emotion. He quickly picked up the gun that had shot his friend and swung it like a baseball bat by the muzzle, smashing it to pieces.
Destroying evidence.
That's right. All the time he was doing this, Stephen screamed out in front of others, "That gun would never kill again." It took until 7:25 p.m. that night for the coroner to arrive at the scene, and Marty was pronounced dead. He left behind his wife and two small children.
Sad.
It was. The next day, a preliminary autopsy was done, and the officials signed off on the original ruling that had been made at the scene the night before. Marty had died from an accidental, self-inflicted gunshot wound. Stephen, grief-stricken, acted as one of Marty's pallbearers. It was a hard time in his life. His best friend had just died, and a couple of months after that, his divorce with his wife Anne was finalized. So it seemed like a good time for him to start over again. Stephen left Montrose and moved to New Mexico, where he had previously lived and practiced medicine. Patricia, or Pat, Marty's wife, and Stephen kept in touch after the move. Shortly after Marty's death, she too moved away. Only it wasn't to New Mexico.
That's what everyone was thinking.
That's right. She actually moved to Philadelphia with her two children. For Pat, it too was a particularly hard time. There was a lot of uncertainty for her. And that was because Marty's life insurance policy had been put in his children's name and not hers, a change made just a couple of weeks before his death. Pat now was not only grieving the loss of her husband, but was now a single mom trying to work to support her children. During that time, she felt that Stephen was one of her only friends that truly understood what she was going through. So, when her long-lost friend showed up in Philly 2 years after Marty's death in 1977 with groceries for her and the kids, it was a natural progression to start dating. according to Pat.
We all know this is hogwash, but we're going to get there.
But I did think this is not an uncommon situation when you have kind of a trauma bond.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? The two were married on June 18th, 1978, and settled in New Mexico. The family later moved to Lincolnton, North Carolina in 1992. Stephen set up a successful family practice and worked as a respected physician for the next 20 years. The couple were the picture of a devoted family, raising Marty's 2 children and adopting a 3rd child together, a son named Jonathan. Marty's parents, Larry and Joe Dillon, weren't happy about who was now acting as the father figure for their grandchildren. Larry, the mayor of Montrose in 1976, had never bought the accidental shooting story. He believed his son was too experienced of a hunter to ever run with a loaded gun.
And untied shoes.
Right. To Larry, this whole story just didn't add up. Plus, he, like everyone else, had heard the rumors circulating around the town at the time of his son's death. Back in 1971, Marty Dillon was a successful up-and-coming lawyer, and he had befriended Dr. Stephen B. Scher, who was new to town. Stephen Barry Scher was born in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, on May 10, 1940, but later moved to Michigan and would become a U.S. citizen. He was a smart man and attended the University of Michigan, where he studied biology before pursuing a career in medicine. When he was a second-year student at the University Medical Center, he married his wife Edna, or Anne Elias, a bacteriologist, on June 9, 1963. Usually we dig deep into a dirtbag's past, but in this case, it didn't really play into his motives. By all accounts of Stephen's personality, he was a charismatic man used to getting what he wanted. In 1971, he and his wife Anne had recently moved to the Pennsylvania area to start a new medical practice. The clinic was out of the Montrose General Hospital, where Pat Dillon worked as a registered nurse. As the new doctor on the floor, Stephen was a striking figure, standing 6'1" and 245 pounds.
And he's a doctor.
Yes. The two men were introduced through Pat, and they hit it off. They held similar interests in hockey and hunting, and it wasn't long before Marty was inviting Stephen to the men's club. Their friendship continued to grow into a family affair. Marty and Pat and Stephen and Anne enjoyed spending time together, and the families would even vacation together. But it wasn't the only time Stephen liked to spend with Pat. Stephen began to arrange his schedule to match Pat's at the hospital, and it didn't take long before the rumors started to fly, as early as 1972.
Oof.
Yeah, barely a year after the new doctor had come to town. One witness would later say that patients were made to wait over an hour while the two were locked in an examination room together.
A whole hour? That is not what you consider a quickie.
No.
You don't take your time at work, people.
Well, apparently they were. And the rumors weren't just at the hospital or from unreliable sources. Stephen's car was often seen visiting Marty's house when Marty wasn't home. Even the poor paperboy got mixed up in the rumors and had his own story to tell.
And to get that story from the paperboy, you're going to have to go back and listen to the original episode.
Yeah, that poor paperboy, what he walks into.
He was not being paid enough.
No. The rumors were prevalent enough that Anne did hear about them, but she brushed them off at first. Then, on one of the couple's family vacations to Colorado around 1974, Anne began to suspect that some of the rumors that she had been hearing around the office were true. Her suspicions were met with gaslighting from Stephen. He blamed her own insecurities and tried to pull the wool over her eyes, even going to the extent of treating her with antidepressants and tranquilizers because she was just a crazy, jealous wife.
What a dirtbag.
Yeah. She came to believe that Stephen was trying to actually encourage her to kill herself, and that realization had her seeking a way out. Anne filed for a divorce late in 1975, and the divorce was finalized in 1976. It was a very messy divorce, with lots of blaming and he said, she said. In actuality, it sounded like the truth was closer to what she said he actually did. But Stephen was a crafty dirtbag, and most believed his version of events. Around the same time that Stephen was getting his own divorce, he was trying to solve the problem of Pat's marriage as well. But divorce for Pat just wasn't an option. She was a devout Roman Catholic. Yes, an affair was okay, but divorce would be scandalous.
Mm-hmm. Maybe not that the affair was okay, but a lesser sin than divorce.
Yes, that's how she felt. It sounded like Pat called off the supposed affair. And I say supposed affair because it was all just rumors and hushed whispers at this time. Nobody was actually confessing to anything. The rumors circulated, though, enough that after Marty's death, his dad Larry kept digging and prodding into his son's death. The investigation was reopened by District Attorney Snyder at the encouragement of Larry in early 1989. But after a panel of experts deemed that an accidental death could not be ruled out, Snyder conceded that there was insufficient evidence at the time to prove that Stephen had done anything wrong. During this first revisiting of the facts, first responders were called at the scene that Marty had been found laying on his back with blood pooled on his left side. His hunting goggles and earmuffs were on a stump about 5 to 6 feet away and had blood on them. Pictures and evidence from the scene showed that Marty's arms were outstretched and his chest was saturated in blood. He had blood spatter on his boots, but none on his ears or his eyes, where the ear and eye protection would have covered if they had been on. And there were streaks of blood indicating that they had been removed after the shot. Marty's left 8-inch high hiking boot was found to be untied at the top. The 3 top hooks were unlaced, but the laces were still pulled snug and his pant leg was elevated over the boot. Under Marty's left hand were broken clays. There was no blood on the inside or the outside of the barrel on the now broken gun.
And if it had been shot at close range, like Stephen had said in his account, you would expect there to be blood on the barrel of the gun. There would have to have been.
If it was shot from close range.
Yes.
And upon review of the case, investigators noticed that the ammunition that was discharged was not one typically used in skeet shooting. Larry also learned that the cause of death had never been fully investigated thoroughly because the chest wound had already been sewn up by the funeral home prior to the supposed autopsy. It sounded like there was some confusion because the coroner that had attended the scene had already listed the cause of death as accidental. So the body had first been released to the funeral home before going for an actual autopsy. In January of 1991, a private investigator hired by Larry concluded that Dylan's death could not have been an accident based on his reconstruction of the crime scene. He had measured the wound size in the photographs and scaled them to determine that the hole left by the bullet was much bigger than what would be expected for a close-range shot to produce. It was speculated that Marty would have had to have been crouching while throwing skeets, not running as Stephen had said, because the crime scene photos showed that both pant legs were bunched around his knees and elevated enough so that both of his socks were plainly visible in the pictures. This theory was also supported by the blood splatter found on the instep of his left hunting boot as well as on the stump that was close to his body. In 1992, the boots that had been taken from Stephen 2 days after the shooting were found to have blood and fragments of tissue on them in a high-velocity spatter, indicating that he was actually close by to the shooting. Not the 150 feet away that he had claimed to be to first responders and the coroner the night of the supposed accident.
It's just so shocking to me how much the evidence in this case was screaming as to what actually happened, but everybody just was so complacent or happy to believe a trusted doctor.
That's right. He was the doctor at the scene. He could call the shots and he was just telling the coroner, this is what happened. And they bought it, hook, line, and sinker for 20 years.
It's astonishing, really.
It really is.
Because when you go through the details like Melissa tells in this case, it is bewildering to me that it went unsolved for so long.
It's so true. All of this re-examination of the photos clearly laid out what had happened. And that's why Larry requested his son's body be exhumed for another autopsy to prove these theories.
Thank goodness he did.
Yeah. Pat and her children objected to Marty's remains being disturbed. During the civil suit over the right to have the body exhumed, both she and Stephen denied having any relationship prior to Marty's death.
But it just doesn't seem plausible that you would not want to know the truth, even if it had been 20 years later. Especially if you are saying you did not have an affair with this man, and then to find out that there's a possibility this man that you've been sleeping next to for the last 2 decades and has helped raise your children could have actually murdered your husband.
Right. But Pat just could not wrap her head around that being a possibility.
Or she already knew deep down.
Part of me thinks that that might be the case because why would you deny the relationship?
Right.
Despite Pat's objections, on April 29th, 1995, Marty's well-preserved body was exhumed. The bullet wound they found did not jive with Stephen's story. The scalloped edge of the wound indicated that the shot pellets had traveled through the air because they had started already to spread out. The angle of the wound was also completely wrong for a gun that had been dropped and gone off accidentally. The bullet trajectory was on a downward angle. On June 26, 1995, Marty's death was officially declared a homicide. That day, the state police named Stephen as their main suspect. The next day, Stephen returned to Pennsylvania and held a news conference in Scranton challenging the police to charge him.
Oh, that's a confident dirtbag right there.
During the press conference, he actually said, quote, "Arrest me and let's get on with this trial so I can forget about the last 19 years.
That doesn't even make sense.
No, what an odd thing to say.
Yes.
But it is just what the police did on June 20th. Stephen was sent to Susquehanna County Prison and bail was set to $750,000. Pat's family members put up their houses for collateral for the bond. They all believed in his innocence. Pat refused to believe that Stephen had anything to do with Marty's death. In a press conference, she declared that Stephen was not capable of such a thing and that she had lived with him for 17 years, and so she would know. To help defend Stephen, Pat had Marty's body exhumed for a second time to have their own pathologist, Dr. Michael Baden, who had worked on numerous other high-profile cases, including the O.J. Simpson case, re-examine the body. He was commissioned to find evidence that supported the accidental shooting claim, or the claim that Marty was suffering from depression at the time of the shooting, and maybe the shooting wasn't accidental after all, but perhaps a suicide. Stephen's lawyer went as far to hint that the original coroner had purposely neglected to put the findings down in the written report because of the political connection to Marty's family and not wanting to hurt the family anymore. This third autopsy wasn't as useful as they'd hoped. Stephen's stepchildren supported him through the trial, not only sticking up for him and providing moving testimony about his kindness and care, but using the $65,000 that they had inherited from Marty's estate for Stephen's defense.
That part blew my mind when I first heard it.
Yeah. During the 1996-1997 trial, the prosecutor presented the argument that Pat had been confronted by Marty about the affair just prior to his death. Given an ultimatum, she had chosen Marty. Stephen didn't take this news well, and the prosecution believed that this was the motive for him to kill his best friend. They presented him as an arrogant doctor with a God complex that was accustomed to getting his own way. The prosecution pathologist walked the jury through why he believed that Marty had been shot from several feet away while in a crouched position. They argued that had Marty been running with an untied shoe, it would have worked the laces farther down loose. There was no porcupine he was chasing.
And if he had tripped on the shoelace, there would have been an imprint and probably dirt embedded into that shoelace.
That's right. Instead, there was only blood. During the trial, Stephen decided to take the stand. Feeling the need to explain away some of the evidence the prosecution had presented, he changed up his story. In his original statements to police right after the accident, he said that he and Marty were discussing a particular rumor that was going around, and he was considering leaving town because of it. He said at that time that Marty had called him a chicken and not to worry about small people talking. Now on the stand, he changed his story. Stephen changed from his original story to say that Marty had confronted him about the affair. Marty had said that Anne had come to tell him that Stephen had said that he loved Pat. Stephen said he had come clean and told him that he was having a physical affair, but not a love affair. In his testimony on the stand, Stephen said that he had pointed out to Marty that it was as much his fault as anybody else's. And that's when Marty lost it and a fight broke out between the two of them. Marty grabbed the nearby gun and Stephen had to defend himself, so he grabbed the gun too. And that's when the gun went off and Marty was shot accidentally as the pair struggled over the gun. Stephen admitted that he had untied Marty's shoes in an attempt to make the story more believable and that there had never been a porcupine. When asked why he had never fessed up in the 20 years that had passed since the shooting, he said he was trying to protect his family from the pain and the truth. The trial became a battle of coroner reports and expert opinion on whether this fight was actually possible. After 6 weeks of trial, Stephen was convicted on October 22, 1997 of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. He appealed almost immediately, and he would be successful. His original appeal was granted and his conviction was reversed on June 7, 1999.
Ugh.
And just like that, he was freed from prison, as long as he posted a bond and checked in with his parole officer daily. He was made to do this because the courts believed the prosecution would be fighting the appeal ruling, and that was definitely the case. At the time of Stephen's release, Pat, despite facing her own legal issues now because it was determined that she had lied during the civil suit, made a statement saying, quote, "Sometimes it's hard to believe in miracles, but we have one, and I am thankful." The two returned to living a quiet, comfortable life in the suburbs, for a time at least. The decision on his appeal would be overturned, and Stephen would be ordered back to prison in 2002. In 2004, the court ordered a new trial to be held to determine if Stephen was guilty of first-degree murder of his best friend. During the second trial in March 2008, the prosecution presented the same evidence, this time focusing on the ear protection that had been removed after Marty had been shot. They argued that had Marty been wearing ear protection at the time that he was shot, then he really couldn't have been having a discussion about the affair with Stephen, as he had claimed during his testimony during the first trial.
True.
Yes. For a second time, the jury returned a guilty verdict after 2 hours of deliberation, and Stephen, at the age of 68, was once again found guilty. Stephen died in 2010 of natural causes at the State Correctional Institute at Laurel Highlands in Somerset County on August 9th. He was 70. The announcement of his death was met by his former patients expressing gratitude for his care. Sounds like he was a great doctor, but not such a great best friend.
Definitely not the type of friend any of us would want to have.
No, you want out of that friendship for sure. And that brings us to our final season, winter. It signifies a period of reflection and often the end of relationships. Feelings of loneliness and despair can take over, leading to severe emotional distress.
In some cases, one partner may not be able to cope with the relationship anymore, and murder can be the ensuing result. The coldness of winter symbolizes the chilling end of love.
Our next case is brought to us by Kim Toller from A Million Other Choices.
She will tell us a case about a relationship that lasted through the seasons until it didn't.
Hello and happy Valentine's Day. I am Kim from A Million Other Choices, and this is the murder of Roberta Snyder. In Hartville, Ohio, which is a small, quaint little town of about 3,000 people, when you close your eyes and picture a small town America, that's Hartville. One of those everyone knows everyone, and there's really nothing to do but gossip at the hardware store, which doubles as the post office kind of towns. And in this quiet little town lived retired couple Phil and Roberta Snyder, a lovely elderly couple who loved to play cards. Married 53 years and grandparents of their son and daughter's children who had both been born and raised in Hartville. Wholesome and just your regular couple that like to spend their days in the garden, doing crafts, and visiting with neighbors over the fence. I cannot stress to you enough how normal 69-year-old Roberta, who neighbors and friends called Bobby, and Phil were. And imagine 53 years of marriage. I can't even imagine still being married next week. I mean, some days maybe, other days maybe not. But just picture your average Caucasian couple in their early 70s, Roberta a little bit plump in the midsection and a fan of sweatshirts with cute sayings on them with kittens, and Phil with his thinning gray hair and tummy spilling over his belt, a chronic look of either disapproval or confusion, you can never really tell which, plastered on his face. But in her 69th year in 2017, Roberta and Phil were devastated to learn that Roberta had cancer, and it was terminal. There's no reports say what kind of cancer it was, just that her medical records indicate that she did in fact have cancer. Roberta was a huge fan of Elvis Presley, and Phil loved Roberta, and he wanted to give her one last trip to Graceland in Memphis before she passed. So on January 4th, Phil called a friend and his son and Roberta's brother Brian to let them all know that they were off for Roberta's final Elvis vacation, and she was most excited about it. But in a most devastating twist, Phil returned home alone and notified her brother Brian and their son. I believe they actually had more than one adult child, and I think there was a daughter as well, but I can't confirm that. But I know for a fact there was an adult son. That Roberta had passed away on the trip. And Phil, without his wife by his side, was confused and just not really sure what had just happened. They had made it to Memphis in the hotel that they were booked at. But in the car, she had started to choke on her phlegm, which was something that she'd kind of been doing for about a year now. And he had flagged down 2 paramedics that happened to be in the parking lot of the hotel. And they ran over and tried to revive her, but they told her that she was gone. And then they told him that they were going to transport her to the coroner's office, and there was really nothing more that he could do. Now, Phil, in his confused and distraught state, took that to mean that there was nothing more he could do and that he should just go home, as in go home to Ohio. And he just didn't know what else really to do. So he came home. And Brian and his son were like, but Dad, like, where did they take her? And he said, I don't know. Well, what did they do with her body? I'm not sure. Now, his memory was really fuzzy, and he just wasn't sure about much. He said that something about them telling him that they were going to cremate her, but he wasn't sure. But where were her ashes? He didn't know, and no one had told him anything. So Brian went to the Hartville police station and told them what had all happened and said, asked them, can you please try and track down where Roberta's remains are? Phil just wasn't able to give very many details. He was very confused, and it was all just really upsetting for the family, as you can imagine. So an officer goes out to the sniper's house to talk to Phil and maybe poke his memory a little bit so he can try and figure out where Roberta's body maybe was. And Phil shuffles to the door to answer in his slippers and tells the officer what he remembers, that they had made it to Memphis. He realized that she had died in the truck on the way. He flagged down paramedics and that they took her away, and he came home. He says he's doing as good as he can under the circumstances, and after 53 years together, the cancer diagnosis was a bitch, and he just wanted her to see Graceland one last time.
You guys okay?
I'm okay, yes.
Okay.
My wife passed away. She choked on her phlegm. She'd been choking for quite a year.
Okay.
And she wanted to go down one more time before she died. I think she knew she was going to die. They took her to a place where they cremate people.
Okay, and you don't know where that is either?
No.
So the officer calls the coroner's office in Memphis. There's no Jane Doe's, no record of Roberta. So he called all the hospitals and EMTs, and the same thing. No one had any record of transporting or helping Roberta. Now, they kind of have to find Roberta because there are laws about disposing of human remains. Like, you can't just leave a body and walk away from it, no matter how old and confused you are. So they come by the house again the next day and ask if he's got some receipts or anything from the trip so that they can try and track down the trip and maybe figure out where Roberta's body is. And as is protocol, they would like to take a look around the house and just make sure she's not there being tied up or something. I mean, you never know, right? And Phil's like, sure, no problem. Just can you make sure your shoes are clean? Because Roberta did keep her house very clean after all. So together they sit down and they look at a map and go over it, and Phil pulls out all the receipts that he has. They had made their first stop in Sparta, Kentucky, and checked into the Ramada Inn on the night of the 4th before heading the next day the rest of the way to Memphis. Okay, cool. Thanks, Phil. This helps a lot. This gives us a place to start. And they decide, since Phil's memory is not so good, that the best place to start is by tracing a timeline and trying to track down any security footage and talking to people that maybe had encountered the couple on this trip. So the first stop being the Ramada Inn in Sparta, Kentucky. Only the surveillance cameras show Phil pulling into the parking lot in the white Ford F-150 that he drove, with only him in the driver's seat. There's no Roberta, and he checked in alone. And the desk clerk remembers him, but that it was just him, and he is seen on camera entering this hotel room and leaving the next morning alone. And come to think of it, yes, Phil did seem very confused and befuddled, like old man befuddled, but he didn't seem particularly upset by his wife of 53 years' death. I mean, he was kind of matter-of-fact about it. Do you think that? No. So they go back to Phil's place to ask him a few more questions and show him the footage of him checking alone. Phil is looking at the pictures confused, and he says, no, she was with me in Sparta. She was fine. So they say, look, we know that she was sick, but the kids and her brother need to know what happened, when and where, and they need her body for a proper goodbye. And he says, well, are you going to take me to jail? And they said, well, did you kill her? No, of course not. Then probably not. But there are laws around a person's death and stuff. Like, it has to be documented properly, and you have to dispose of remains properly. Otherwise, yeah, it's kind of a crime. So he takes a minute to gather his thoughts, and he says, okay. She died on the way to Memphis of natural causes. But on the way home, I put her in the Tennessee River. Because it was on the way home. And he didn't do anything to her, of course. I mean, there's no emotion when he says this. He says, I just wanted her to be safe with nature. If she went downstream, no one would ever find her. But kind of odd, when he was asked again, but she died of natural causes though, right? He says quietly, you can almost not make it out on these tapes. But he says, I don't remember. First, he says, I threw her in the Tennessee River, but later changed that to I placed her in the river. Throwing her didn't really sound so good. So now the police at this point are starting to question this whole story, and they're starting to think that maybe she didn't die of natural causes. But they got to do their part, so they searched that river with boats, helicopters, divers, and the whole gamut, and came up with nothing. No sign of Roberta at all. And then they got word that Phil had been admitted to the hospital because of a suicide attempt. Now, at this point, Roberta's whereabouts have been a mystery for 16 days. So the police take advantage of his absence from the house and get a search warrant. And wouldn't you know, in the basement, in a red plastic tote filled with Christmas decoration, wafts a smell of death, and a white plastic bag with the cutoff from the front of a woman's sweatshirt with the Hartfield, Ohio logo on it. And there were tiny bits of blood in the bag, but not enough for them to declare a homicide. And they believe that the logo from the shirt had been cut off because if Roberta was found wearing it, it would be a dead giveaway as to her identity and lead back to Phil and his story about her natural death. A review of his credit card statements revealed that he had used her car in Wooster, Ohio, and filled with gas using her card. And surveillance shows that he was alone then as well. Then on January 4th, the supposed first day of their Graceland trip. So this time, Phil was talked to at the hospital where he had been admitted to the psych ward due to the suicide attempt, questioned about being alone in Worcester, and he still claimed that she died on the road. And the case kind of went cold because without a body and nothing to conclude that she actually was murdered, but detectives were not giving up on this case. And by now they were pretty convinced that none of the 73-year-old Phil's story was true at all. Then enter Joan Bauer, a new officer to Hartfield with a background in undercover work. She says she's pretty sure that she can get this guy. So she studies him a bit, gets to know his patterns, which wasn't really much of a pattern, more like a routine of coffee at a fast food restaurant, trotting it up with the locals. So Joan saunters into the Burger King one day and asks, is there anything to really do around here? You see, she says she's from Cincinnati, her name is Missy, she's in town taking care of her sick mom, and the lady that takes care of her during the day, she's not a big fan of her, so she needs to get out. And she can't wait to get out of this hick town. And Phil, being, old and from the area, starts to chat her up. Just friendly, well, there's a park over there, there's a Walmart over here kind of talk. But it's a small town, so wouldn't you know, they keep running into each other. And so they build kind of a friendship, meeting at the Burger King or at the Wendy's, playing some cards and just shooting the breeze. And over time, Missy starts to tell him that her and her mom were never really close, and that there are times when she thinks about just offing her. LOL, just kidding, ha 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 stuff. And he starts to tell her things like, well, there are ways to kind of speed up the process for your mom, to help you get back to Cincinnati a little bit faster. And Missy, a.k.a. Joan, is fascinated by this. Oh, yeah? Tell me more. Is that what happened to your wife? I'm dying to know what happened to her. But before he tells her what happened, he says, because I'm getting old and I might go to jail at some point, you and I should probably get married. 1, you can get my pension, and 2, you can't testify against me. And then he finally spills the tea. Now, this is just a maybe scenario, of course, a musing of what could have possibly happened. He asked around to some guy about the dumpsters behind the Wendy's, what happens to them? And this wouldn't really arise suspicion, a grown-ass man asking what happens to dumpsters, but it did bolster his identity as a man with possible dementia. Anyways, the contents go to the dump, of course, and get buried under a heap of other garbage. Seems Phil had had enough of his wife of 53 years and was fed up. I guess the thought of, after 53 years, having to make your own grilled cheese sandwich and wash your own socks because your loving wife is sick could kind of wear on a soul, I guess. They had had an argument on January 2nd, 2018, and she had slept on the couch as a result. The next morning, he went out for his normal coffee chit-chat at the Wendy's, came back home to find that Roberta was still sleeping on the love seat. So, like you do when you find your sick wife of 53 years napping, he put a shop cloth gently over the side of her head without waking her and bonked her on the head with a 2-pound mallet. Bonked. That's a direct quote.
Bonked her in the head.
He then tied a plastic shopping bag over her head to keep him from getting blood everywhere, wrapped her in a tarp, gathered up anything with blood on it, like the pillow, the mallet, and the lampshade, crammed her into a Rubbermaid bucket, threw all of it, including Roberta, into the back of his pickup truck and made the trip to Memphis, dumping various whatnots of evidence in places along the way. Now, just a scenario, of course.
Can you imagine a hammer this big and this big around?
Like a mallet?
Yeah, 2 pounds.
Okay.
Just scenario.
Right.
Say I bonked her in the head.
Right.
And her tongue came out. Just scenario.
Right.
And I put a bag over her head.
And with that, the police entered the Burger King and arrested 73-year-old, "You gotta be kidding me," disbelieving Phil, who could not believe that he hadn't gotten away with it. Phil made a deal and pleaded guilty to aggravated murder, abuse of a corpse, and tampering with evidence in exchange for a 20-year sentence with a chance of parole in 2038. He will be 93 then, if he's still alive. He's serving his sentence at Richland Correctional Institution in Ohio. As part of the deal, he had to show them where he put Roberta's body, and he led them to a bar and grill in Bullitt County, Kentucky, and pointed to a green dumpster out back. Roberta is believed to have ended up in the landfill and buried under a good 8 feet of garbage. Now, sadly, it would have cost the county several $1 million to try to locate her, so she has not been recovered and given a proper burial. And that was the crazy murder of Roberta Snyder. And you know, I couldn't find one report or anything that showed that Phil had any kind of criminal past or wasn't well liked in the community, or that there was any reports of the relationship between Roberta and Phil being volatile, anything like that. They were just your very normal, average small-town couple leading quiet lives. And it wasn't even that he didn't want to see her suffer. In his words, he was just fed up. He didn't snap, just had enough of being married to her.
Wow, Kim. That was the perfect case to end on at the end of our seasons. It's shocking how someone can make it through all the seasons of love and then after 53 years just have enough.
It certainly was a cold reality and a cold heart that would do that after 53 years of marriage.
Cold like a Canadian winter.
Yes. And that brings us to the end of our Broken Hearts Collaboration 2.0.
We want to wish everyone a very happy Valentine's Day and a heartfelt thank you to all the other podcasters who decided to join us this year.
We've enjoyed this immensely, and we hope our listeners have too.
Please take the time to check out everybody's podcasts. We'll have the links in our show notes. So please feel free to check everybody out. Again, I'm Christy.
And I'm Melissa.
And we're the hosts of Buried Motives.
And we'll be back again next week
with a brand new case.
Until then.
See ya.
Bye.